Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we're in our 23rd year, I interview writers about their craft, what they've done in the past, what they're working on today, what they might have planned for the future. We also have room for other kinds of artists. Sometimes we've had on sculptors, we've had on actors, we've had musicians on the show. It's a pretty wide net. So if you have ideas for guests who might be good for the Writer's Block, whether they're writers or not, watch for our address at the end of the show and send in your suggestions. We'd be glad to see them. I mentioned that we're in our 23rd year, and I and Cape Ann TV are very proud of that record. But I want to point out that we're just one of the many shows created here on Cape Ann TV by Cape Anners for Cape Anners. It's really a wonderful community project, and we're proud of all of those programs. It's not something you can get when you subscribe to Dish. It's a cable community operation, and I just wanted to remind you of that before we start tonight's show. Tonight we are very lucky. We do have a writer. Her name is Betty Erkkila, and she has written a book called My Little Chickadee, and we're going to be talking about that book in a minute after my introduction. My Little Chickadee is an enchanting memoir encompassing the time slice of 1941 to 1949. By the way, I'm reading from the about the author paragraphs in My Little Chickadee. Coming of age as a shy, unassuming girl of Finnish-American descent, Betty Kalinin Erkkila conjures up reminiscences about home, school, and church life in Rockport, Massachusetts. One chapter harkens back to her parents' lives during the 20s and 30s in Lanesville and Pigeon Cove. So we go back and forth a little bit between Gloucester and Rockport there. Pursuing an eclectic career, Betty has been engaged as an elementary school instructor, legal secretary, English as a second language teacher for adults, a homemaker, a shopper for elderly clients, and a guide at a historic house museum. She fancies Finnish language study, travel, music, and reading, and Betty and her husband John reside in the Pigeon Cove section of Rockport. That's quite a busy schedule, so we're very happy to have you on the show, Betty Erkkila.
Thank you for your invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, before I do anything, I'm going to show the cover of the book, so it's burned into people's awareness. This is My Little Chickadee, with a picture of guess who on the cover, Betty Erkkila, when she was 4?
Oh, perhaps 3, 4, I'm not quite sure. And it's actually a black and white photo which has been colorized, and the publishing outfit added some pink touches to it, gave me my blue eyes, which I have, and the pink bow. And
blue eyes and just a hint of lipstick there.
Right.
Tell us when you got the idea for this book, Betty.
Well, actually, I would say it goes back to the year 2000, and after a Thanksgiving dinner, I got thinking about the word legacy, and I thought, gee, I don't have anything that I can leave behind after I'm gone. I haven't really done anything greatly significant, didn't invent any particular medicine or create a concerto or something of that nature. And I thought, well, what could I do? Something that I enjoy doing. I like to play with words. I thought perhaps I could tell about growing up in Rockport, especially in the Pigeon Cove section. And so the book encompasses the time period from 1941, my birth, up through the high school graduation, 1959. And then also in the book, besides the 9 chapters, I put in a historical timeline so we know what's going on in this country, in addition what's going on in the world.
At the very end.
Right at the end.
I'm going to read the chapter names.
Okay.
So that the audience can get a little flavor of this. There's a prologue, and then chapter 1 titled Early Years on Pigeon Cove School, 2, Rockport High and Junior High School, 3, Home Life, 4, Church, 5, Holidays, 6, Jobs, 7, Fashions, chapter 8, Movies, TV, and Songs, and then chapter 9, review of the families. Would you say Kalinin?
Keelanen, accent the first
Keelanen.
syllable, right.
Keelanen and
Keelanen.
Jacobson families, and then an epilogue and the little summary of events through that period. So you started this in year 2000.
In 2000, and I didn't work on it, on a regular basis at all. You know how life intervenes, and
It does get in the way.
it would just be in my filing cabinet, the various drafts that I did, and then finally, I wouldn't really even have a book, I don't think, if it weren't for my husband, John, and he gently prodded me to get going with it. And then finally, in the year 2011, he said to me, "What about your book?" I said, "Oh, my book." So I really started working at a much more rapid pace, and finally located a publisher. I went with North Star Press out in Minnesota. That's who I finally went with. It's a self-published book, actually, and
It's becoming very, very common because it's
right.
easily done now. I should point out that your sister and your husband are here
Yes,
for family
I'm
support.
delighted.
So you thought about it 12 years ago, and then really got on the case
Right.
about a year and a half ago or so.
Well, to really refine all of my revisions that I had made. And so I would say the book probably was done in 2009, pretty much. And then I was rather apprehensive about finding a publisher. I had read various publications such as Writer's Digest, Publishing for Dummies, that type of thing. And it made me quite apprehensive about turning over my project to somebody and then perhaps losing control, maybe not having the title I wanted or verbiage that I had created or whatever. So finally, this was really serendipity. I was in church, and the editor of the Finnish American Reporter, a newspaper out of Michigan that comes out monthly, happened to be on Cape Ann on business, and there was no place left for him to sit at all except next to me in church. And so I got to talking to him. I later wrote him a letter, asked him if he could come up with names of some publishers out his way, because I know there were some that dealt with Finnish American publications. And so he wrote back, gave me 3 ideas, and I investigated them and spoke with people and decided to go with North Star Press, and it worked out very
So
well.
he just happened to sit next to you in church.
Just happened
You must
to.
have prayed well then.
I guess I did. I did. So that was what really was holding me back. I think the book should have come out in 2009, but as I say, I was really nervous about turning over my project, which meant so much to me, to somebody
Sure.
else. And
But did that work out well, though? The people that you decided to
It worked out.
publish with didn't try to change your
No.
text, didn't try to
No.
talk you into changing the title? or anything?
No, they really did everything I wanted. At first, I didn't think they would go with the cover photo because it's black and white, but I really had wanted that, and they went along with that. And I think I saw in the book maybe two words that she might have changed somewhere. Perhaps I had overused a word somewhere, and they went along with what I had done. And the woman that I dealt with mostly, I dealt with 2 women. It was a family organization. She said to me, "Don't settle, have it just the way you want." And so my husband was great about sending out the drafts out there, on the computer to Minnesota, and the photographs, and they'd keep coming back and until it was what I had wanted to my satisfaction. So it worked out well for them and for me both.
I read the chapter titles, and I wonder if you could pick out something from the book, from one of those chapters, to read for us that gives us a little sense of the tone of the book.
Okay,
and
sure.
some of the specific subject matter.
Put on my cheaters here. There really are anecdotes galore, I would say, in the book. And, most people have heard of the book 50 Shades of Grey, which I have not read yet, but I plan on it. This particular paragraph deals with one of the teachers at the Pigeon Cove School, which I attended from kindergarten through grade 6. And she really loved the color brown. So if I wrote a book about Mrs. Margaret Kuhn, I could call it 50 Shades of Brown, I think. But anyway, it's a short paragraph. I narrowly missed having Mrs. Margaret Kuhn, a stern disciplinarian. I had instead Mrs. Doyle for the 5th grade. Mrs. Kuhn was enraptured with the color brown and wore usually a brown 2-piece suit, a brown velvet bow in her updo, and used brown ink in her fountain pen. Because the then 3-cent stamps were blue, she instead used 2 1.5-cent stamps because, you guessed it, they were brown. A couple years later, when Mrs. Kuhn suffered a heart attack, her charges had a substitute, and the boys spilled ink all around the floor. When Mrs. Kuhn returned, she made the erring boys stay in each recess and extract every bit of ink off the wooden floor. Sometimes, after a high decibel diatribe, she banged the door into her classroom so hard it shattered the glass. As I recall, she had an afternoon stamp club at her home, a former church building in the color of brown. I found out recently that my sister told me that Mrs. Kuhn also drove a brown car, which I hadn't remembered, actually.
So,
You have brown on tonight, John.
I do.
John, too.
I do. Yeah. And brown slacks as well. So that's very interesting. I've never met anybody quite that obsessed with color.
I know, really. Would you like another paragraph?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And that was from the school section.
That was from the school section.
The early section in the book.
And then this is from the...
tell me what page you're going to read from.
All right, the next page that I'm going to read from is on page 31, and it has to do with the Straitsmith Inn. I did have a photo of it here somewhere.
Oh, we can
look at that.
We can
All
go
right.
to those pictures all at once,
Okay.
I think, in a minute.
Well, it tells about the burning down the night the Straitsmith Inn burned in Rockport. There were, in the 1950s, quite a plethora of hotels that burned on Cape Ann, and this is another one that did, unfortunately. I happened to be at a house party that night, and it was interesting because that evening what was playing on the record player was a song called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. I don't know if you remember that one at all. So I'll read this paragraph. Circa New Year's Eve 1958, unfolding into 1959, there was a celebratory party at Jerry Tuck's house on High Street. Since his good-natured parents were ensconced upstairs, as teen revelers we had the run of the lower level. The living room was dimly lit, and we did a lot of cheek-to-cheek dancing, listening to records and stealing a kiss or two. The 45 RPM record was spinning Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, while we were all dreamily slow dancing in the darkened space. All of a sudden, the fire alarm came blasting in. The Oceanside Straitsmith Inn was ablaze. We partygoers rushed to the conflagration. Dad, a volunteer fireman, requested dry socks. All the firefighters and their wives were later feted with a supper evening by the owners, even though not much was left of the inn, except for the dining room kitchen portion. According to a previous guest, we heard this years ago, a lady named Dorothy Wilson, who had vacationed often at the hotel, one seat location in the dining room depended on how long a tourist had been staying at the inn. It took several years to get a window seat with an ocean view.
That's a very nice. It's a very nice memory there. That fire, and
Yes.
I know that in the 50s, many of Magnolia's were old
Right.
hotels burned as well. Now you mentioned the Straitsmith photograph that you bought, and I want to and before we go too much farther, I want to mention that in the center of the book, there is a collection of very, very nice black and white photos. I think there's 17 or 18 pages of them, and you can see the Kylanens and many of the families and individuals mentioned in the book in these photographs. Now they don't show up real clearly on television, but we're lucky enough that Betty brought some of the original photographs with her, and we're going to show some of those right now as I'm going to hold them up,
Okay.
and Betty's going to describe them as we go and make sure that I've got the right side up. So tell us now, Betty Erkkila, what are we looking at here?
We have my mother and father, Matt and Rachel Kielinen. My mother, Rachel Jacobson Kielinen, was born in Lanesville. She never left Lanesville until she was 12 years of age to go to Gloucester, as a matter of fact. And she married Matt Kielinen, who was born in Pigeon Cove. There on the right-hand side, sitting on my mother's knee, is my sister Shirley. She's the middle girl. I'm actually the oldest of three girls, and she's clutching a stuffed toy. And there I am on the left with my father's arm right there.
This is you. And what year is this?
Late 40s, late 40s, I would say.
Now we have actually a color picture. They're not all black and white here.
That actually was a slide.
Color picture of...
That's my sister Jane Kielinen Knight, who actually is the children's librarian in Rockport. She's been doing that for close to 2 decades. And the slide was taken by my uncle Fred Jacobson and given to me by Fred Jacobson's son. It's Jane with our beloved dog, boxer dog Duchess. We were just crazy about that dog. Mom and Dad found her at a gas station in Amesbury. She had, as you can see, floppy ears, and we had a lot of fun with her. Pushed her around in a baby carriage, and people would say, "Oh, whose baby are you taking care of today?" And they'd look in the carriage and see the beautiful black face and the brown floppy ears.
What year would this be?
I'd say maybe the early 50s, 53. No, it was, I know when, about 1955, I think we got her actually. So 55, 56, somewhere in there.
So we have now a large family portrait. And I know what's on there because I'm reading the back. But go ahead and explain that.
That's the kindergarten photo at the Pigeon Cove School. And there you can see the school in the background. There's quite an addition which got added at a later time. And the building now is used as condominiums, as a matter of fact. So there's probably about a dozen students in the class here. And here I am off to the right, kind of scooching with a couple of ribbons in my hair. Christine McNeil Moore, she's in real estate. I don't know if you happen to know her at all.
I don't.
Everett Jilka off to the right. Homer Sweet, he lives in Gloucester now. Cynthia Hillier Hinckley. Sheila Story. And
well, we know who should be watching the show. Yeah, at least many of them.
right.
And here is another picture of a house in winter.
My father had to go to work as a young man of about 15. His own father had passed away, and so he had to go into the world of work. He did plumbing work till he was about 38 years of age, and then he really was a very creative person, so he decided to go into building. He built about 8 houses in the Pigeon Cove section, and then he also built cottages and a small motel in Rockport. The project was called Boulder Top, but this was the first house that he and others built on Granite Street at 243 Granite Street. His mother had given him the property, and the granite was quarried from the lot, from the premises. So that was a favorite house of mine to live in.
Now this,
That came out of the section on the Kielinen and Jacobson family, and of course that was before I was around. The photo is my Uncle Theodore Cleo Jacobson from Lanesville, and the photo was taken in 1939. Uncle Cleo is actually admiring Onni Erkkila's Harley-Davidson motorcycle, and you can see how dapper Uncle Cleo looks, complete with a fancy-looking belt and a tie on, no less. So I don't know of any Harley-Davidson riders that are attired with a tie.
we were all more formal
Right,
culture back then.
exactly.
Now here is another group shot.
We were very,
Then-
oh, excuse me.
Go ahead, please.
We were very close with Cynthia and Susan Keelan. We actually are doubly related to them because two brothers married two sisters. My mother and her sister Sylvia Jacobson married Matt and John Keelan from Pigeon Cove. And plus, Cynthia and Susan were our neighbors, so we spent all the holidays with them, a lot of time. And we're on a seesaw in Uncle John's backyard. And here's Jane off to the right. She's the youngest of the group right over here on the seesaw. I'm next to her, my cousin Cynthia, my sister Shirley, and cousin Susan.
So you're about 12 or 13 there?
I look as if I would be about that age.
So this is mid-50s, 53,
Right.
54.
And so he had swings for each of us and the seesaw and did a lot of fun things.
Here's a last portrait here is a, well, I know what this one is too because I've got the description on the back, but you should go ahead and tell us what this
That
big building
one
is.
actually is not in the book, but I had that made. It's the Straitsmith Inn, which was located off Marmion Way in Rockport, near what many of us remember as the Coast Guard station. And so that was the hotel that burned. Actually, it was 1958, unfolding into 1959. I
So
did
this is on the north side of town, of the Cape area. Quite a huge building.
Right, absolutely huge. So I just remember, I think a lot of people remember that fire very vividly, and it's just ironic that when we were at that house party to have the record playing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and the alarm came in, and we just flew down there to take a look at the blaze.
The Straitsmith Inn is the only one that's not in the book. The others that we saw
The others
are
all
part,
are.
part of the book. Good, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I just got from our camera person, Kate, the 5-minute signal. So I want to make sure I get a couple last questions in.
Sure.
Where can our viewers, and I'm sure it's everybody in Rockport is watching the show tonight, where can our viewers get a copy of My Little Chickadee?
Well, I didn't go and put the book in myriad places. It's actually in Rockport at Toad Hall at the bookstore, at Tuck's, also on Main Street, and then the bookstore of Gloucester in the west end of town. So
there's 3 locations.
In 3 locations.
The candy store,
right,
the candy store, and 2 bookstores.
right. Buy a book and buy a pound of fudge at the same time.
A pound of fudge.
That's what I do.
Fudge is my favorite. What's next on your writing schedule,
Well,
Betty?
I got my husband John to collaborate with me. We've been working for the last few months on a picture book of Pigeon Cove, not Rockport, but the Pigeon Cove section. And so we've been getting photos from people that go back to the 1800s, and then we don't want any more recent photos than 1959. And so we're looking for pictures that have really been seen. John will scan the photos and then give them back to the person. The person would get credit in the book, and then I would write the caption. So
some real authentic
right.
local
So-
history.
And then we can also, I think, use some of the archives of the Sandy Bay Historical Museum as well. So that's
And where is that?
it's in Rockport on King Street and Granite Street.
The museum.
The museum is, right. That's a real treasure of a place too. So we have already looked in the files, and they have a lot of exciting
And when
photographs.
do you think that book might be out?
I don't have any idea, but I hope it doesn't take as long as this one. So,
Well, you've got a lot of experience now,
Right.
so it shouldn't take quite as long.
so hopefully. So we want to try to start working at it, a little bit more enthusiastically, shall I say. We took a little bit of time off during the summer, but now it's time to get back to work and start
Good.
focusing on our next project.
Well, we'll look forward to that. I just got the 3-minute signal from Kate about 2 minutes ago, so I better start wrapping up. Betty Erkkila, I want to thank you, excuse me, Betty Erkkila, I want to thank you very much for My Little Chickadee, which I enjoyed reading, and I know that anybody from Cape Ann, not just Rockporters, would enjoy reading. I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers out there in TV land for being with us as well. If you've learned something about authentic Rockport history from the 40s and the 50s and getting into the 60s a little bit from Betty Erkkila, then the Gloucester, now I'm starting to get stuttering here. The writer's block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the writer's block. Good night.